delivery and lots of food for thought from our dear brother Cyrus. Please welcome our next speaker, Brother Nadim Daoud. Nadim Daoud is a historian with interest in the Ottoman Empire, currently writing a book about the use of control orders in the War on Terror. As a political activist, Nadim has worked with many groups, Muslim and non-Muslim. I welcome Nadim's contribution.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد والصلاة والسلام على صحبه وعلى آله أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. After hearing Cyrus's talk, I'm just glad I'm second and not last. I don't know how I'm going to follow that, let alone the rest of the panelists. So as Sister Nadia mentioned, I'm a historian, and my view on the Caliphate will be somewhat historical. And I want to discuss sort of two questions. Unfortunately, 10 minutes, to delve into this topic. It's not a huge amount, unfortunately. But perhaps we can lay down some points to discuss and some things to think about. So the first two questions that I think anyone would naturally have is, number one, why discuss the Caliphate? And I think that's an important discussion, especially now, because we see people co-opting or misappropriating the term Caliphate, the idea of the Caliphate, and using it to legitimize whatever they want to legitimize. In particular, we're talking about Daesh, but also the left have an idea of the Caliphate as well. So I think in that context, that's why it's important to actually discuss the Caliphate. It's not a dead topic. It's not something that's confined to the history books. It is very much alive, and therefore we do need to actually engage in a proper, objective discussion about it. So let me be clear in discussing this topic. I'm not here to apologize or make excuses for the Khilafah or the Caliphate. I'm here just to facilitate that discussion along with the rest of the panelists. So, when we talk about decolonisation, what do we mean? Most of us will be familiar with the idea of colonisation of the East, in particular, talking about ideas of Orientalism, and that whole kind of topic in terms of how the European powers went and committed atrocities and then imposed a view of life and so on the East. However, we sometimes fail to discuss the political colonization. And by political colonization, what I mean is a colonization of the politics of the East. So let's be clear on what we're talking about. We tend to discuss the narrativization of history as historians, the narrativization of history, and how it's co-opted by Western historians, European historians, and they've imposed their own viewpoint on history, effectively making everyone else a detragonist to the Western protagonist. In the same way, the politics of the East have become the detragonist to the Western protagonist. So before the colonization of the Middle East, there was a polity that had existed for almost 400 years, and that polity was the Caliphate. And so when we come to discuss that polity, we cannot discuss that polity from the perspective of secular liberalism or the morality of the West. That polity must be discussed through the moral lens of the Middle East, of Islam. Right? It's a polity that has developed from Islamic thought. Whatever your views are on that. And this is the problem we find today, that when we do discuss the Caliphate, when we do discuss the Khilafah, it's always confined to that discussion, and we are never able to have a proper objective discussion on it. We are never able to say what how the caliphate would look if it existed today. It's always a moral judgment on, well, the caliphate does such and such, or Islam believes in such and such. And therefore we never come to the actual crux of what the caliphate is. And that's a colonization. That is a colonization of the topic of the caliphate, of the politics of the Middle East. Because by confining the discussion to a secular liberal discussion, we are always going to come and arrive to the same problems, which is that we're just going to come and condemn the caliphate, we're going to condemn this polity, and we never get very far. Let's also be clear that, as much as the secular liberals on the left have colonized the idea, Daesh, ISIS, that's like the elephant in the room, have also co-opted and colonized the idea of the caliphate. I don't think there are many Muslims who would agree with Daesh's interpretation of the caliphate. And this again comes back to this whole discussion, the whole point of why it's so important to engage in this discussion. Lastly, I would just like to say that Islam is political. Islam does have a political viewpoint, and therefore to dismiss that and to sort of sideline that discussion is very dangerous, because when we do that, that's when we get people like Daesh and Al-Qaeda and so on and so forth emerging, because they have no challenge from a normative Islamic perspective, a decolonized normative Islamic perspective, and therefore they're able to get away with claiming they're a caliphate and committing the crimes and genocides and so on and so forth in the name of a caliphate without any legitimate or without any opposition from a normative Islamic perspective. So I look forward to the discussion on that. I think that's confining it to this lens of actually discussing the caliphate as an objective thing, rather than discussing it from a secular liberal point of view. Jazakallah khair.